Hello people, welcome to today's video. Who amongst you is fond of boat rides? Those of you who have actually ridden boats will know that the boat is associated with numerous old songs and ditties that boatmen usually sing. Why? Simple, to ease the monotony of the long travel. These songs are often deeply lyrical and philosophical, representing the flow of water as the flux of life and relating seafaring to living or sailing through the vast stretch of life itself. It is in this context that we are going to study the poem The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, one of the greatest works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. A mariner is a sailor who has undertaken quite a few sea voyages. The poem describes the path of retribution and redemption of a sailor as he undergoes a perilous voyage that challenges his perception of the world around him. However, before we begin with the analysis of the poem, let's learn a bit more about the poet. Samuel Taylor Coleridge is considered to be the founding figure of the era of Romanticism in English literature, along with William Wordsworth. He influenced generations of poets. He made a name for himself both as a political radical and as an important young poet. He famously collaborated with Wordsworth on the revolutionary Lyrical Ballads of 1798, which not only inaugurated the Romantic era in England, but also turned the established conventions of poetry upside down. If you don't really remember what the Romantic movement was all about, you don't at all need to worry. We are here to help. Romanticism was a movement that preferred natural speech over poetic diction. It stressed on emotion and feelings over rationality, and the experience of natural beauty over urban sophistication. Coleridge was a poet who championed imagination, exploring the relationships between nature and the mind with exceptional beauty. Poems such as The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan are a testimony to his talent for creating bizarre, supernatural stories full of fantastic imagery and magic. You shall notice how the poem brings the world of mystery and occult into contact with what we know as the real world. Now that we know our poet, let us start with the analysis of the poem and the themes covered. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is one of the cornerstones of Coleridge's work as a poet. Coleridge often privileges weird tales and bizarre imagery over the commonplace, rustic events of everyday life. And we find an example of this in this particular poem too. The poem is unique amongst Coleridge's important works. Let's take a look at how it begins. Look how he cleverly creates the setting in a faraway mystic landscape. This makes it easier for him to later introduce supernatural elements in the poem. This setting at the beginning is called an epigraph, and it usually sets the theme and tone of the poem. Notice the use of Old English words throughout the poem. Part 1. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. He holds him with a skinny hand. There was ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, grey-beard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. Through this intentionally archaic language, its length, its bizarre and moralistic tone, and its thematic strangeness, the poem became unique amongst the other works of the Romantic era. The scholarly notes, the epigraph, and the archaic language combine to give the impression that the poem is actually a ballad or a song from the old ages, in keeping with its seafaring theme. Notice also how the rhyme of the ancient mariner is written in loose, short ballad stanzas, usually either 4 or 6 lines long, which may occasionally become as many as 9 lines long. The rhymes generally alternate in an ABAB or ABABAB scheme, though again there are many exceptions. The poem opens with 3 young men walking together to a wedding. One of them is stopped by an old, grisly-looking sailor. The young wedding guest angrily demands that the mariner let go of him. The young man is, however, intrigued by the ancient mariner's glittering eye and falls under the spell of the strange story that he then relates. The mariner says that he sailed on a ship out of his native harbour, below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top, and into a sunny and cheerful sea. The wedding guest is magnetized by the mariner's story. The mariner recalls that the voyage quickly darkened as a giant storm rose up in the sea and chased the ship southward. The ship became stuck in a frigid land covered with mist and snow. Ice was floating all around, telling the readers that the ship was perhaps stranded in the seas of the Antarctic region, which, at that time, had not yet been mapped. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold. And ice, mast high, came floating by, as green as emerald. And through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between. Just when all hope was lost, the sailors encountered an albatross, a great seabird. As it flew around the ship, the ice cracked and split, and a wind from the south propelled the ship out of the frigid regions into a foggy stretch of water. The albatross followed the ship and became a symbol of good luck to the sailors. The mariner confessed with a sad face, however, that he shot and killed the albatross with his crossbow, apparently for no particular reason. At first, the other sailors were furious with the mariner for having killed the bird that made the breezes blow. However, when the fog lifted soon afterwards, the sailors decided that the bird had actually brought the fog. They now congratulated the mariner on his deed. The wind pushed the ship into a silent sea, where the sailors were quickly stranded with the winds dying down. The ocean thickened, and the men had no water to drink. It was as if the sea were rotting, with slimy creatures crawling out of it and walking across the surface. At night, the water burned green, blue, and white with death fire. Day after day, we stuck nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boats did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yea, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. Some of the sailors dreamed that a spirit 9 fathoms deep followed them beneath the ship from the land of mist and snow. The sailors blamed the mariner for their plight and hung the corpse of the albatross around his neck like a cross. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young! Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. The poem is like an archaic ballad, full of elaborate symbolism. There are several aspects to consider about Coleridge's use of symbolism in the poem. A number of interesting readings, ranging from Christian parables to political allegory, can be linked to the poem. A more interesting way to read the poem is that Coleridge represents it in the way in which people interpret the past as unknowable and mysterious. Coleridge also creates tension between the ambiguous poem and the ridiculous notes, exposing a gulf between the old poem and the new attempt to understand it. The poem takes the mariner through the worst of his trials. He kills the albatross in bad faith, subjecting himself to the hostility of the forces that govern the universe. Coleridge seems to suggest that nature has its own ways of seeking revenge, and the system lies beyond the traditional religion of Christian faith. It endows him with a death-like life as the only survivor from the incident, forever cursed to narrate his sins over and over. After earning his curse, the mariner is able to gain access to the favor of God, able to regain his ability to pray only by realizing that the monsters around him are beautiful in God's eyes and that he should love them as he should have loved the albatross. Now that we have gone through the poem, let's try to answer some of the many questions from the poem that might come in your examinations. Why were the sailors furious with the mariner for killing the albatross? The ship was marooned with no sign of any reprieve. This had made the crew lose all hope. At this point, the albatross appeared, and immediately their fortunes took a turn for the better. So, they attributed this change in fortunes to the albatross. As a result, the sailors were initially angry when the albatross was killed. Question 2. The fortune of the sailors went downhill when the albatross was killed. Do you think this is symbolic of divine punishment? Coleridge has a way of building in occult or supernatural elements in his poem. He presents the albatross as a symbol of nature and goodness, bound with the ship's crew in a circle of brotherhood. The needless act of violence that the mariner inflicts on the albatross, which also represents man's atrocious sins against nature, is a symbol of man's power acting against nature's ways. Therefore, the fortune of the sailors going downhill may indeed be read as a sign of divine retribution against man, who is a fallen being and inflicts harm on God's creatures. That's all for today, boys and girls. Feel free to go through the exercise section. Till next time, goodbye.